Welcome to this video for product owners, and this video is going to cover the sorts of things that you need to be aware of and that you need to do in the requirements refinement stage. So as a quick reminder, this is the series of stages that we talk about in SVT, single version of the truth, for our development cycle. And requirements refinement is all about how we take what was captured under requirements capture and we start to expand and augment and refine those requirements into such a form that we can prioritize them. So let's just step through this. It's about expanding, it's about challenging ideas and what you're told, refining and then augmenting those needs to be able to produce a well understood need and potentially a functional solution. So produce and articulate. So really to be able to explain in writing what is needed and potentially what is the solution. So we'll break that down into, or rather, you also may want to think about for a large requirement, how you would break that down into potential delivery phases. So for example, when we considered the requirement to have to deliver a completely new US out of home product, it would be a pretty tall order to be able to write everything down, do all the development, and then pull the covers off this thing perfectly formed a number of months later in all its glory. Most requirements that are of any significant size, certainly for new products or new projects, will have a number of potential delivery phases. So it requires you to think about what is the MVP, minimum viable product, or maybe not just viable, but minimum valuable product. What's the minimum we need to deliver for the business to get a first delivery of this new feature or this new requirement? You will in this stage work with whoever requested the requirement, whether it's yourself, so internal consideration and discussions, or whether it's others, to fill in any missing details and to clarify what's wanted. And you'll almost certainly in this stage start to work with a technical lead for technical solutioning and also for ballpark estimates of the level of effort involved. So this is all about now refining requirements. So let's step through the next 4 or 5 slides. Well, first of all, why do we need this? We need this because imprecise requests will always cause us to fail. What will happen if you hand over a poorly defined requirement to an engineering team? You have to expect a bad outcome. You know, it may feel fast and quick, verbalize what you need to an engineer, and then expect them to deliver. My experience and the experience of many product managers is that that just results in a bad outcome. So you really do have to write stuff down and it needs to be well defined. The problem with poorly defined requirements is at best, they're going to slow us down because they're going to be causing delays in development itself because lots of questions have to be asked, or they'll cause multiple rework cycles where the work is done, it's discovered then that it wasn't really understood, and then it has to go back into rework. So that's at best. At worst, you're going to get completely flawed development. And not only are we going to then not deliver the thing that you wanted, but we've also suffered the opportunity cost of not being able to deploy that resource on something else. So that's, you know, that's the worst possible outcome. So I will say that if something is worth doing, then it's worth investing the time to fully describe it. I think it may be Abraham Lincoln who's attributed with the statement that if I had 8 hours to chop down a tree, I'd spend the first 6 sharpening the axe. This here is kind of where we're sharpening the axe. You can just go in swinging, but you're not going to be effective, or you invest the time to understand and refine the requirement so that then everything that follows is smooth and simple. So let's keep going. New requirements, you know, they never arrive fully formed. Even the simplest requests will contain hidden or missing meaning, and it's going to trap you and it's going to derail your product development. So to reiterate, invest the time up front. If you invest the time up front, it's going to speed up the entire process. And you know what? It's actually going to save you time as well. It's a difficult one in today's business environment where we're all pressured for time. We've all got overflowing inboxes and to-do lists. Requirement comes in, you just got to get it into development fast. It really is flawed thinking to think that you're just going to hand this thing over and you're going to back it off to a developer to build. it's going to boomerang back to you later on. So just invest the time at the outset. What have we got here? Many requests will be accompanied by an assumed solution. So what I mean by this is sometimes requests get stated in the form of a solution. So the request might be, we need a refresh button. So you might take that and say, I need a refresh button on the screen right here in blue to be able to refresh the page. But that's actually the solution to the problem. What you've got to try to do is get under the covers and think, what is the problem? Well, the problem is that the page wasn't updating. But what you've done is you've taken the requester's idea of the solution, which is a refresh button, and you've implemented that. Well, in fact, there might be a better way to do it. There might be a faster way. There might just be a better way all round. So try to avoid assuming that the assumed solution is the best way. So two assumptions there. You know this phrase, when you assume you make an ass of you and me? This is like making a double ass of yourself. Don't assume that the solution that has been assumed and therefore requested of you is the best way. Tease out the why. Why is the best question. Why do you need this? Why do you want it? Why? Find out the need. So the key for this stage is that the detail needs to be discovered. You need to tease it out. It happens when you start writing stuff down, when you start sketching out the need and thinking about the possible solutions, then you'll really start to find the gaps. So I think I may have showed this in an earlier video, which is when you start thinking about, let's imagine this is a requirement that has some sort of user experience flow. It can just start simple. User does this, then does this, and if this happens, they do this, or this happens, they do that. So imagine that's a login page. User logs in. User sees a home screen. The moment you start to write this down, you start to think about, well, what if I forgot my password? What if I forgot my username? So this is the mere act of actually drawing stuff down means you'll start to flesh out and expand and augment the requirement. You will be amazed at what you uncover. So it's about expanding and refining what you heard. In most cases, you'll need to expand and clarify the request. Best way is through discussion and writing it down and sketching out possible solutions. So a further aspect that you should be thinking about here, since Telmar is a global company, you should be thinking, if I'm thinking globally, can I genericize this request a little bit and then give it a much wider benefit than the original requester intended? So I don't have a specific example for you on this, but this might be a requirement that comes in from, say, a North American team for a new capability in out-of-home planning. Try to talk with other product owners, talk with product managers, talk with colleagues. Can you think how that requirement they've given you, if expanded a little or if genericized a little, could benefit all of our other markets and maybe even benefit other products or capabilities in a product range? Could this requirement that's requested in terms of out of home be also valuable in terms of radio planning? I like to think this is a great opportunity to add massive value. If you can think how you can solution it such that the solution can be applied to other products, then maybe 110% of the effort to deliver it is going to give us 200 or 300 or 5% of the value or the utility. So always be thinking globally, always listen to the need, perhaps listen to the assumed solution, try to get behind the solution that's suggested and think about what is actually being asked, what's the problem that's trying to be solved, and then think about, is this a problem that maybe is more widely applicable than just this one customer or this one product or just this one region. 2 slides here. I'll talk about simple needs and I'll talk about complex needs. So let's start with simple needs. So for BAU, business as usual, new feature requests, change requests, and bugs, let's say that approximately less than 1 man week of effort, those can go straight to Jira. This distinction, by the way, between simple and complex, you can also read more about that in SVT. So it's under this area, getting new works into development. So what you'll find here is, here we go. There's a section for business as usual works, and there's a section for new projects. So The idea of these videos is really not to do word for word through these pages, but just to signpost and direct you. So you'll find out here how to get simple works into the process and how to get new projects into the process. So for the simple stuff, it generally goes into a story in Jira, and that goes into the backlog. You literally and specifically do not have authority at this stage to move stories into the sprint. Every story needs to be associated with an epic because that's the product or the big goal that we're rolling up to. And you would start by, in Jira, assigning it to you. You also need to get it estimated. Again, you don't need to remember all this because all this is described in the SVT process. But again, just signposting you to some of these things. So a story gets written in the backlog, associated with the correct epic, assigned to you, and estimated. And this is where you'll work with the technical leads. So when we start doing the videos for the tech leads, then they're going to understand how they get involved with you as a product owner to get estimates for level of effort. So correct story format is described. The story should be well formed. So what does well formed mean? That's described under here. Again, it's all in the wiki. So key concepts. Here we go. What is well formed? So this is going to explain it to you. Summary of what's wanted, who it benefits, what is the thing that's needed, why is it important. So, and in fact, there are even some examples here. So here's a good example, here's a bad example. So I'm going to leave you to look at those in your own time. And the story needs to have an estimate, and an estimate is done in the form of story points, which is also explained under key SVT concepts. So let's see if we can find story points on here. Estimates, probably under here. Here we go. So these are the story point numbers that we use as a guide. And you see story points approximate to time, but they're not exact time because the truth is at this stage, we don't know. You don't know. The engineer doesn't know. I don't know, but we still need an estimate. You would use the description field in the story to provide more details. So remember this point. Others are going to need to be able to understand this. If you can't articulate it clearly, you cannot expect anybody else to understand it. And you know what? If someone else can't understand it, there's no way they're going to be able to build it. So if you need to, find out more, think it through more, write or sketch it all down in the Jira story. It's not to say that simple needs don't benefit from Confluence pages. Confluence pages are kind of like all the, the notebook that you might have sitting behind the Jira ticket. So I always think of Jira tickets as being transient. You create a requirement, Jira ticket gets prioritized, gets worked on, but when it's done and it's gone. It's possible to find those in Jira, but Jira isn't the place for persistent information. It's transient. It's the work packages. It's the workflow. So you can put a Confluence page behind your Jira ticket, and the Confluence page is going to augment over time, and that's persistent. So even whilst the feature is being delivered or the bug's being fixed, you've got that Confluence page sitting there, which means that when the new feature is available, now you've got that source of truth, a single source of truth, the reference point for being able to create, let's say, a customer fact sheet or a how-to guide or a script for client services or some raw material for marketing to be able to go and make a presentation for a conference, or raw material for a salesperson to go and build a slide presentation just about that feature. So Confluence, 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 write it down. I would also encourage you to use the comments in Jira and tag others in the comments so that as the story that you created gets updated, then they get alerted. And back to this point, ultimately, if you can't articulate it, there's no way anyone else is going to be able to understand it. Certainly, no one's ever going to build it. So invest the time at the start, and it will save you time. I guarantee you. More complex needs. So big new features, generally these are more than one man week's worth of effort, or anything that's a fundamental change to a platform, or even a new project entirely, needs a project initiation document. And that is always done in Confluence. You would do this before you even do the story. You can get the product managers to help you with this, but you do just have to get started. There is a PID template, which I'll show you now. And the point of this is, how do we quickly and simply capture the minimal information, but all of the information that we need to be able to present a new project to the interested stakeholders. That's everyone from biz dev, finance, IT, product, yourself as a product owner, and to be able to present the information succinctly so that that committee can make a decision on whether we're going to do your project or this other project or this other project. So let's have a quick look at this. The PID template states the current problem. It states sort of both sides of the financial equation. So what do we think is the revenue or the customer or the regional benefit? So is it about revenue protection or new revenue potential? Is it about existing customer protection or new customer potential? Which countries? And then the investment. So I talked about estimates. You're not going to know these numbers exactly. I would say really don't be scared by the format of this page. In fact, it's probably even mentioned here. Let's have a look. Don't worry if you can't answer anything. You know, some things may be impossible to know for sure, but aim to do everything because a template helps the review board understand. You will not get this right at one sitting, but again, just get started. Give yourself the permission to get it wrong or to make a mistake. That will solve you or stop you becoming immobilized because you're fearful of getting it wrong. Just start. There's no wrong answer on this stuff. You can always engage a product manager or even a colleague as a product owner to help you get this done. So effectively, we've got what's the benefit, what's the cost, so development cost, external cost, project management, testing. Restate the problem. Any key dates? Is this needed by a customer for a particular event or a product launch? What do we think are the timescales? Any technical or legal or admin concerns? So that's the PID template, and it's just laid out there so that you're not faced with just a blank page, not knowing where to start. Use the comments and tag others also on that PID, because that PID is actually just a Confluence page. You would take a copy of this. I can show you probably some that are in current review. Let's have a look. New project review board. So here's one, South Africa audio planner, filled out. You can see it's not a lot of information. Very, very simple. Here's another one. A little bit more information here. So you capture the information, grab it where you have it, reference other places, and tag people in this page if you want them to be alerted when this changes. You will need to get a product manager sponsor at this stage. You're going to need that in order to get this in front of the project review board, and you'll definitely need a tech lead to help you complete the PID, because you remember that section about the development costs? What we're going to be looking for from a tech lead is, based on the information that's known to date, how many man days do we think this is? And then we're going to roll that up with a blended average of cost to give us a ballpark cost of the development. And this is really important. You will need to talk to people, obvious. If I could highlight anything on this page, it would be these words here: real-time two-way communications. Email will not do. Many of us that have been working with computers and in tech for anything longer than a few years will find that we often just default to email as our means of communication. The problem with email is it's an asynchronous communication. We tap out an email, send it off, turn around, get on with the next thing we want to get onto. It's just going to come boomeranging back the next day. And often when you're expanding requirements and trying to refine them, you need two-way discussions. So again, I would say if it's important enough to do, invest the time and make it happen. So how to start with this? Honestly, just get started. It's never perfect, and we don't need perfection. Give yourself permission to fail. You really can't get it wrong. All you can do is just make a start, and then others will draw around you to be able to expand and augment and refine. Also, I would definitely encourage you to go and look at this page again. I'll show you it once more, getting new features into development, because it'll explain how you can step through this process to get features into development. So in here, there's everything from how we prioritize, different types of requests, tools we use, what are BAU works, what are new projects. And in here also, it's probably jumping the gun a little bit. Yeah, I'm going to talk about a fast track process on a later video. So certainly read this, getting new works into development. Finally, tools and ceremonies. You will, in this stage, be using Confluence, and you'll be using Confluence pages. It would also help you to expand a sort of delivery plan. So that might mean month one, let's work backwards. If you've got an anticipated launch date, let's say you've got a deadline that you need to meet, what do the steps look like that go between now and then? If you don't know what the delivery plan looks like at the outset, at least have a heading on your page, and then we'll fill that in later. I can give you an example of what a delivery plan might look like. Let's look at a project that's currently in development. So even though this project is in development, it started pretty early on with the notion of a delivery plan. And so here we go. It's very simple. In fact, this started out with nothing like this granularity. And as you get into the project, it expands and you learn more and you understand more and the page gets updated. But the idea here is you have a goal. Week one was, let's have a look. New engineering team members are tasked with reading through the Confluence page. So there's understanding and knowledge gathering. Week two, review the first week's output. This is pretty granular. I don't necessarily think you would go that granular. Let's have a look at maybe US audio. This is a project that's at an earlier stage. So I would expect the delivery plan to be not so well formed. And you can see it, so it looks out 6 weeks or so initially. So delivery plan, and if needed, a project initiation document. So use Confluence for this stage for sure. You use Jira because there's the backlog and you're writing stories, and in stories you have a description, and you might be linking back to the Confluence page that you created, which expands the story, this requirement a little bit further. You will certainly be using two-way real-time communication, so discussions, video comms, Slack messages, and I would say email has its uses, but it's very far down the list. Please try to avoid defaulting to email. Ceremonies, they're still, I'd say, really informal ceremonies. They're not ceremonies in the sense of agile ceremonies, but I'm going to call them ceremonies anyway. You might refine requirements through meetings or calls with clients where clients have requested the requirement or whether the requirement applies to them. You might want to check your thinking. You will probably have internal calls and maybe meetings or video conferences, and you will certainly be doing your own thinking here. So that's requirements refinement. And the next video that we've got up is prioritization.